Left the discussion, we are on final passage of House Bill 206. Recognize the senator from Jefferson for discussion. Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will begin again. So because we have discussed this bill previously, or versions of this bill previously, I'm going to highlight especially the differences between this and the last time that we discussed education reform bill. So this bill includes a sales tax holiday from the first Sunday in August, the previous Friday and Saturday, and the following Monday. A little tax holiday for essentially school supplies, and there's a list in the bill. This bill also continues many of the provisions we put in terms of the Mountaineer Challenge Academy, the Digital Literacy Project, but it did eliminate and change some of the aspects in the local school improvement councils. Part of the things that they did is they limited the required annual meetings between the county boards and the LSICs to only those of low-performing schools. It doesn't prohibit the LSICs in meeting annually, but it just removes the requirement, except for those in low-performing schools. It removes the requirement that the meeting include a quorum of LSIC members. It requires the principal or chair to address the dialogue with the community on how to address issues of the school's academic performance. And there's several other small things and some technical cleanup. Another one of the changes that it made was, there's a lot of things that are the same, and I'm just trying to focus on the changes. It modifies the section that requires LSIC to establish at every school the number of members. So it actually increased it from 2 to 3 for at-large members appointed by the principal, changing membership in the cases of vocational technical school, comprehensive middle schools, and comprehensive high schools. It removed the prohibition against more than one parent member of the council being employed. It allowed notification of organizational meetings to be done by electronic means and increased the advance notice required. It also, in this bill, it increased the amount allotted to the classroom teachers and librarians for academic materials and supplies from $100 to $300. It, of course, has the charter schools, and we've discussed that, I think, a lot. It replaces the existing requirements applicable after a student has said, this is the same, I'm sorry, excused absences, excuse me, Mr. President. Okay, it had a few changes to the definition of professional personnel, and I think we discussed this already in the amendment stage. It made no changes for the net enrollment of 1,400 and below. It had an increase in the amount that we are giving for professional student support personnel, and it makes an allowance of 5 for each 1,000 students. It also allows that if a county so chooses, these services may be provided through public-private partnerships or contracts. I believe that that is the extent of the changes. Am I missing anything? I think that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Recognize Senator from Cabell County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be brief. I believe that the majority party is under a misapprehension that when this bill is challenged in court, that the newly elected members and appointed members of the Supreme Court will see favorably the constitutional frailties of this bill. And we've been through it before. The bill contemplates multiple objects, which conflicts with the West Virginia Constitution. And the bill conflicts with Article 12, Section 10, which says no independent free school organization shall be approved without the majority of voters voting. So I think the misapprehension, and we all took that oath to uphold our Constitution, The majority of the majority party understands that, yes, there is a new court, the Supreme Court of Appeals, of course, I'm referring to. But what I think you, Mr. President, you may misunderstand is the fact that you had 2 felons on that last court, and they're gone. They're now convicted felons, but they're gone, and there's a new court. I've paid fairly close attention to the justices' decisions since we have the new court. Overall, on balance, I'm fairly pleased. I'm actually very pleased with many of the decisions they've made. So I think if there's an assumption here that this is going to be, everybody's going to get a wink and a nod like what happened on the Daniel Hall case, you're mistaken. So I would urge a no vote for that reason.
Other members desiring to...
Sorry.
Senator may proceed.
I have an update on the tornado. From what I understand, if this bill passes, the tornado is expected to arrive November 10th of 2020.
We'll confine our comments to discussion of the bill. Are there other members desiring to speak to the bill? If not, all those in favor? Recognize the senator from Greenbrier County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Chair of Education yield?
Senator yields.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. You said you'd be open to questions a few minutes ago. Is class size changed in this bill?
No, it does not.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of discussion about that the last few days. That's my understanding as well. Just wanted to clarify. Class sizes are not changed in any way in this bill?
No.
Correct. Okay. Local school improvement councils, you talked about that there a little bit. That's one of the amendments that we offered. Just please help me understand. I don't understand. LSICs right now, you know, they are required to meet with boards of education, and I'll tell you as a board member, that was one of the best, most productive meetings we had each year. I don't see how diminishing those meetings strengthens local control. How does that happen? If they're meeting less often, how does that strengthen local control?
We actually are not diminishing those meetings at all. It is still absolutely possible, permissible, and encouraged if they want to meet every single year, but we are just taking out the requirement. That's it.
So you think county boards will still continue to have all those LSIC meetings?
It's up to the county boards. That is the local control.
Have you ever participated in an LSIC county board meeting?
I don't really know what that has to do with any of this, but
I think it has a lot to do with it. I guess that's a no then?
No.
Okay. Wraparound services, you know, psychologists, we went through that a little bit ago. Psychologists are listed in one category of employees, but then there's a general definition where they're not any longer listed under student support personnel. How is that going to jive when the rubber actually hits the road and we're hiring these folks?
So the point of broadening that definition is to allow for use of any support student service personnel that is going to help with the social and emotional needs of the students. And we are also including in this bill the block grant funding, sending the money unencumbered so that local counties can choose to prioritize and get all the services that they need, that they feel those students need.
Okay, but respectfully, I'd ask the question once again. I mean, psychologists are listed one place. Now they're not listed. You know, they were listed previously, and I think you were chief architect of that bill, and I thought that was a really good provision. It's not there anymore. But you don't think that's going to cause any problems?
I do not believe it's going to cause any problems. I feel very confident that the definition is still broad to include psychologists, and I obviously do agree. I'm glad that you supported that part of the previous bill.
I did, but it's not there anymore. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The recognize other members desiring to speak to the bill. Senator from UPSHUR County.
Thank you, Mr. President. This time I jumped up quicker than on my amendment on the close, but anyway, I'll forgive you on that one. This bill has a lot of good things in it. It really does. But the one thing that I think is bad is the proverbial charter schools. And since we ran down here 2 weeks ago, I've had emails from countless people, and they say, well, the money that the school boards are going to get, they'll just waste it. My answer was, well, I hope not. State Board of Education, they'll get some money out of it probably, and they'll just grow their employees. And I again said, well, I hope not. But the one that really struck me was this one comment this one person sent. And they said, charter schools will put us back 65 years. And I said, how is that? Well, this goes back to Brown versus School Board. Because the charter schools will probably promote segregation in their schools. And I immediately said, well, I hope not. But that takes me back a few years, my second or third year in the House. One of our fellow delegates had passed away, and his name was Delegate A. James Manchin. And I went to Delegate Manchin's funeral, and when I pulled into Farmington, it's a small coal town, there was a boom box going next to the funeral home in the parking lot. And when I got to the church, I made a comment to somebody, and I said, well, that was terrible. They had a boom box down there. They said that was Delegate Manchin's request. They were playing Who Let the Dogs Out. But what I want to tell you is they told a story. He was, in 1949, was the youngest person ever elected to the House. And he was president of the student body at WVU. And when he took office, he ran a bill 5 years before Brown versus School Board. And his bill was to integrate the public schools in West Virginia. And they went on to say the reason he did that, well, let me back up a minute. Somebody in leadership came to him and said, look, you've got your bill drafted, but it's never going to see the light of day. Number one. And number two, if you put this bill in the hopper, we guarantee that you will not be reelected. Well, he wasn't reelected until in the 90s. But he had the foresight to see that segregation was wrong. Because, see, growing up in Farmington, Farmington was a melting pot, like most cities or towns in West Virginia. It was a melting pot of different nationalities. And there's one thing as he was growing up he didn't understand. The kids played together, everyone. Didn't matter what your color, what your creed, your religion, what have you. But when they went to school on Monday morning, some of the kids went up here, and the African American kids went down here. And he said that's not right. And I hope that person that sent me the email, I hope they're wrong. Because I don't think we want to turn the clock back 65 years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Other members desiring to speak to the bill? Before I recognize the junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hadn't planned to speak at this moment, but I think I need to share a few words. To say that this bill is a heavy lift is a very gross understatement. The problem that I think that we as West Virginians have, and I'll include myself in that, is we stay so ingrained in this difficult thing called change that we have a bad tendency to let the rest of the country and the rest of the world just slip right past us. And that was happening to us on major fronts. And in 2014, the people of West Virginia spoke up and they said, we've got to have a change. And they entrusted that change to do not simple things, but to do things that have not been done, that have not been achieved before. The first order of the House was to get our finances together. We were in bad shape. We were millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. We had leadership at that time, just a couple of short years ago, that came out and said, listen, we are DOA. If you guys don't go out and raise $470 million of new taxes on the back of every hard-working West Virginian, including our teachers and service personnel, we're dead in the water. But the change that was asked for said no. When we were criticized, we stayed in here, but we got our financial house in order without raising a single tax on anybody. We were heavily criticized then. We continue to be heavily criticized for significant, massive, bold changes that we're trying to do to right the ship, to improve the state that we all call home, that we love. The criticism, Mr. President, that you've taken especially over the past year and a half has been overwhelming. I can't imagine, and I haven't seen in my 5 years here, any particular issue that has been this charged, this motivated by those to not affect that change. But you stayed true, you stayed steadfast. This body, including the members, have been very steadfast in their efforts to make that change. We know that the only way West Virginia is going to improve is by changing and improving the future for our children. We're leaving in droves. We're losing our most precious resource. Everybody has thought that. They've said that time and time again. And so we weren't the first to think this. This has been understood for some time. You know, one of our most popular governors, a governor that I as a Republican have voted for in the past, Governor Manchin, realized this change 11 years ago. The comment was made today, well, maybe if the bill was passed a year ago. The bill could have been passed 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I don't think we would be in the situation we were then, but even as mighty and as popular amongst both parties that Governor Manchin was at the time, couldn't get this change achieved. But you, Mr. President, led the charge, and I'm hoping, vote's not been cast yet, but I hope that what we will see is just a first small step that we all work together to move that change and move our state going forward, so we can tell our most precious resources, which is our children, that it's time to catch you up to the 21st century, and we're just going to provide you the opportunities. Don't have to take them, but provide the opportunities. Pay raises, Mr. President, we know that we have to compete. Our educators are vitally important. It's the lifeblood of that change, and we have to get our educators up to a wage. So when these comments have been made about this being some type of retribution, how's it retribution when last year was the largest pay raise in West Virginia history without a single tax? If you take this year, the 5% plus in some instances with math and special ed, it can be as high as 10, 12% on top of the 5% last year. So you look back through history, and I think it was 04, 05 when the state had $1 billion in revenue excess and not a single raise. We know that we have to catch those teachers back up when we've had missed opportunities in the past and didn't take them. It's time to rectify that. So as soon as we got our financial house right, we're making bold steps to try to do that, so that our teachers don't try to go to Ohio and they have families and finances are important to them, and Kentucky and Maryland and their neighbors. We understand that the opioid epidemic that has absolutely affected every family, this isn't a Republican order, every family in this state is affected almost on a daily basis. I had a patient just today talking about how the student, the teacher that had to explain that the student watched his mother vividly in detail give a heroin overdose. That's what our teachers are facing. This bill addresses that with counselors to try to help with those students. It gives local control. How can anybody complain against local control? We're giving that back so that our counties that are so different across the state, they know best what is going to help their kids. And it gives choice. That's all this bill is. Everybody keeps going about that this bill was so great, but they keep going back to the fact that they don't like it as choice. a choice that may never be made. It's up to the local Board of Education. If a charter school never happens, it never happens. It's up to that local school. But again, who are we to say as a body if that county and those elected officials feel that that is the best choice to give their children the best chance at a bright future, to say that we know better and to take that away from them? So, Mr. President, I've heard a lot of comments. I'm ready to move along and cast my vote on this bill. I hope that all my fellow senators would join us. We did a great bill on Senate Bill 1. We were unanimous. This in no way is by any means going to fix all things, but I hope it's a first good step. I've heard several ideals that have potential great merit, and I hope this creates discussion so that future legislators will take this one by the horns and keep moving this further along, and then in a few short years, West Virginia will be at the very top of those rankings. I urge passage. Thank you.
Further discussion. Recognize the senator from Logan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I reluctantly rise this evening. I had not intended on rising, but I've sat here and listened and watched. I looked around this building, especially when I walked outside during the tornado warning. Mr. President, I've worked in this building in various capacities for 20 years. I rise in opposition this evening to this bill, not so much on the merits of the bill. I think this bill has a lot of tremendous things in it. But I am somewhat perplexed by the process and how we got to this point. And again, I'm going to try to be as deliberate and respectful as I can be as I walk through this, and I want to talk about the process of this bill and how we've got to this position, because I think it's very important. We're talking about education betterment. I think every one of the 34 members of this body, Mr. President, we want a better and brighter day for our children. I think we're all firmly committed to that. But we cannot look past the facts that there are some of us in this body that have some level of expertise with respect to education. And I'll use the word some. I'm not going to say I have tremendous level, but I have some. I've made this statement before. I am a 3-term Board of Education member. My colleague from Greenbrier is a Board of Education member. My colleague from Monroe served in the same capacity. The vice chair in the House, who basically was excommunicated during that process when Omniburst or Omnibus 3.0, whatever it is today, came over and now is in the form of a House Bill 2006. One of the most knowledgeable men I know in southern West Virginia in K-12 education. My concerns are, and the majority leader spoke about board members and giving them local control. Let me tell you the reason I got involved in the Board of Education. Because my county of Logan back in the early 90s, we had local control, but they abused it. Because they didn't have enough sense to run their own affairs, and they wasted the taxpayers' money, and they had pom-poms in their hand instead of the school law book. They did things that were wrong, and the state had to come in and take them over. I was coaching a buddy league basketball team at the time. I just turned 30 years old. I had never ran for political office in my life, and the parents says, "Won't you run for the board? That place is a mess." And guess what? I did, and I won. And I went to Dr. Hank Meraki right across the way. I said, "What do we have to do to get local control back in Logan County?" He said, "You've got to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. You have to be fiduciary responsible and do what's right." We did that. We closed schools. But board members are in 2 different categories depending upon their age. Younger board members are not as apt to make tough, financially sound decisions in board meetings because they're not always popular with the public. I've heard the word about permissive till I'm sick of it. Permissive and a young, inexperienced board member are a recipe for disaster. I take that code book, I think is what you ought to operate by because it's codified and that's what it should be. But to get where we're at in this bill, and again, I've been 20 years in different capacities in this building, working for 2 governors and lobbying many of you as legislators for a number of years. I've seen the formation of the committee of the whole to get around a traditional committee process because of one red herring piece of a bill which makes it problematic. And then I saw the implementation that became the genesis for House Bill 2006. We'll call it the Committee of the Quad, because they could not route the bill in traditional manner and get it through education. And I'm not casting stones. Both are legal. Both, I might add, are very creative, and my hat's off to you, Mr. President, and to the Speaker. You've utilized the rules today for your advantage, and that's fair. I'll be the first to say it's fair. Although unique, it's fair. But look what we've had to do and what we've had to endure for 5 months to basically get a 1-vote majority in each chamber. Is it worth the exercise? Is it worth the capital that we have spent with the taxpayers of West Virginia as a whole by going through this ridiculous exercise for 5 months? This bill here basically is almost the same as the bill that came back from the House during the regular session that we wouldn't even take up. So if we take all the cost of the extraordinary sessions, having the Department of Education go through the exercise of having 10 public meetings across the state, hiring a firm to conduct those meetings, the meter just keeps running and keeps running. There's a lot of good in this bill. I will applaud those for that. Before I yield and accept defeat in a most gracious manner, there is one point in this bill I would ask that we as a legislature and as a body at least take up and try to study going forward, because a catastrophic mistake was made by giving 4 personal days for those people to use at their will and pleasure. The principal can sign off to up to 3 people per school, 4 days, anytime they want to use them for any reason. I mentioned this before. Couple that with a holiday, you gave them off the whole week during the 180-day instruction cycle. If you want to curb absenteeism in K-12 education, you're going to have to bring some type of parity between Tier 1 and Tier 2 in the retirement systems. Tier 1 is those people hired before 2015. Their days have value. They save their days. Those are the people that's going to collect the $500 stipend for using less than 4 personal days. Right now, 25% of our people are in Tier 2. And each year as retirement grows, that number exponentially climbs. Those are the people whose days have no value. They burn them. Thus our substitute costs soar, and it's going to keep going higher and getting harder to get people to come in and work. And lastly, we had 5 or 6 amendments that were offered here this evening. And none of you all, I think, can look at me with a clear conscience and say those amendments were bad, mean-spirited, or wrong. But yet, you have to look at me and say they got no consideration because this bill could not journey back across the way one more time. We've created class warfare between our teachers and our service personnel because they don't deserve the same courtesies for missing less than 4 days and getting that $500 stipend. I don't think you intended that, but by not wanting the bill to go back across the hall, that's what we've got. I urge rejection of the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Other members desiring to speak to the bill? Recognize the Senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd be remiss if I didn't add to the comments of my good friend, the Majority Leader. It's been a long process, and the inevitable is going to happen. We're going to pass this bill. By the same vote, we passed every amendment. The governor has flip-flopped, which is no surprise. He generally flip-flops. He flip-flopped from Democrat to Republican. He said in his state of state there will be no charter schools. Now he comes up with an idea, 333. You know, he's taking credit for that. And the whole process, when you look back over the last 6 months and you look at everything that's in this bill, there are good things. There's no doubt about it. And we talk about our constituents want reform. Teachers want reform. Education is an ever-evolving process, and it gets more complex as we go on. There are so many social issues out there that these teachers have to deal with in the classroom. Principals deal with them. They deal with the criminal justice system. They deal with the social services system. It gets more and more complicated. I've been in the system for 40-some years. I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. When I first got into it, it was a privilege. You know, going to work each day and having the respect of students and parents. And then after over about 4 decades, you see that diminished. It's hard to even talk to parents, let alone grandparents. So my problem with this whole bill is we've concentrated on some good things, but we've concentrated on charter schools. We have years and years of historical evidence that proves that it's going to be very difficult for charter schools to work in West Virginia. The teachers say, hey, we're going to forego the pay raise if money is taken from education, and that's commendable. But as I look over, we talk about the charter schools. Thank goodness probably this charter school legislation is probably the weakest in the country. I'll be surprised if there are any charter schools that come to fruition. And it's not going to change the needle one iota. One charter school in West Virginia is not going to change the needle. What's going to change the needle are the wraparound services that we provide these educators with the means to do their job. If a student comes in hungry each morning, the last thing he wants to learn is about algebra. If a student comes in from a situation of domestic violence, the last thing he's going to want to do is learn English language arts. And the drug problem, we wasted so much, 6 months of our time actually debating charter schools. We should be talking about this drug problem. If we can get our hands around the problem that we have with drugs in this state, it's going to improve the environment in those schools. There's no doubt about it. And the time we wasted not addressing the road problem that we wasted on charter schools. I heard the majority leader say, and I've heard many of the leadership say, the largest pay raise in West Virginia history without raising a tax. Well, you know, folks, I was here in 1991 when we gave the largest pay raise that we had to raise taxes. How about that for a real deal? Try to raise taxes on the people of West Virginia. $350 million. We were actually bankrupt, yet we took care of the teachers. The largest pay raise in West Virginia history. We talk about local control. Eliminating the requirement for the LSICs enhances local control. These are parents. These are people in the community that are on these local school improvement councils. But no, we talk about local control, we eliminated the requirement. County Boards of Education in the state aid formula. Once you go through the formula and determine how much each county gets, it's essentially going to the counties in a block grant. The monies go to the counties in a block grant. 90% of that money they have local control over. You know, I don't know where we're talking about local control. And the process we got here. We came to a stalemate at the end of the session. And the governor, who tries to solve things and have ideas, said, hey, we're going out to the general public in the state of West Virginia, and he required the State Board of Education to set up forums throughout the state, which was commendable. Now, who do you expect will come to forums for education? Well, if the educators didn't show up, I'd be sorely disappointed. There were parents there. You know, they produced West Virginia's voice. Pretty good cross-section. 17,010 people responded to surveys. 1,600 showed up and actually attended the forums. That costs money. I'd like to see the total on the tab from the State Board of Education on how much it costs to go around and hear all the comments that people gave that attended. That came as a cost. Those weren't done without a cost. And as we had those costs building up from the State Board of Education, we had additional special sessions, additional cost. I haven't gone back and calculated the number of times we've been in special session and how much it cost, but I'm sure if you add up everything that goes into the forums, into the special sessions, hundreds of $1,000s of taxpayer money down the drain because we didn't listen. We didn't listen to what the people had to say. Senate Bill 451 isn't a whole lot different from 206, from House Bill 206. There's not a lot of difference. We didn't listen. You know, I resent the idea of going through a process, diminishing the committee system that we totally did away with. We had a committee as a whole in the process that's so sacred to this Senate, to the senators that were elected, that were proud to be here and proud to serve. You know, I'm not proud of the way we came to the end of this process. There are things that work. Education is a moving target. People want reform. Teachers want reform. Reform doesn't mean that you have to come up with a new identity. You have to look at a system out there that educates our children along with all the social and environmental problems that they bring to that classroom. These teachers need help. They can't be school psychologists. You know, they can't be social workers. If you can't reach students, you can't teach them. And we've seen evidence of programs that do work. The senator from Harrison provided me with the Braxton County experience. Braxton County, test scores were low. They needed resources into those classrooms. Well, all of a sudden, the gas industry came, property values evaluated, money was available. The Board of Education in Braxton County put the money where it was needed, into resources for children. Now their test scores are in the top 5 counties in the state. We can have reform. We can have relevant reform. This is smoke and mirrors. I would adamantly vote, encourage my colleagues here to vote against this bill.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the bill? Recognize the senator from Harrison County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to correct my good friend from Marion County. It was Doddridge County. I don't want them to say you got the wrong county. It was Doddridge County that put the money in. That we didn't want to give the senator from Braxton any undue credit in the process. But I, too, am going to vote no on this bill. You know, it's funny. I say here a lot that I feel like I'm in bizarro world, that facts mean nothing. This continues that trend. You know, it reminds me of when we stood here on prevailing wage and right to work, or I remember the bullet that was going to go around the corner that was going to create thousands of jobs. You know, we all want the state to succeed. And you know, right now we're in a fortunate time. I think it's going to be difficult to maintain that. And I think to take credit for it at a time when the reins of control in this place were handed over, when the state had really done well in the immediate past and a lot of things were being done right to control what was then a recession, you know, it takes a lot of courage to take credit for that. I always say be careful, because sometimes when you ask for credit, you're going to get the blame. But you know, we've ignored the teachers, we've ignored the boards of education, and I don't care really how anybody tells me to vote. I don't listen to anybody that tells me how to vote a certain way, but I do listen to opinions. And when teachers are willing to give up a raise to stop charter schools that they know is going to defund public school system, I think you have to listen to that. We don't want to let anybody further defund public schools in this state. They're already underfunded. We need to fund the public school system. We need to follow what the senator from Marion pointed out in Doddridge County. What a great model. Public education is the backbone of the American dream. This bill starts it on a path to a nightmare. I intend to vote no on the bill, Mr. President. Thank you.
Other members desiring to speak to the bill? Senator from Jefferson, wish to close debate? Senator from Jefferson, to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be brief. What we have today is a very different bill than what we began with several months ago, but it retains the essential goals: greater local control, choices, empowerment for parents, students, teachers, local county school boards. Ultimately, this is a bill for the betterment of education. Change is difficult, and as the expression goes, no pain, no gain. I look forward with great expectation to the future, that in the next few years, when we receive the first reports in Lucia on the different aspects of this bill, we will all look back at this moment as an inflection point with regard to education in our great state. We have spoken a lot about funding public education. This funds it. $130 million more invested in public education in the great state of West Virginia. Mr. President, I urge passage of this landmark comprehensive education bill.
Question for the Senator, shall the bill pass? Recognize the senior senator from 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 43 of the Senate rules, I inquire as to whether I should be required to vote.
Thank you for your inquiry. In response to your inquiry, it's my understanding that you're a member of a class and your situation will be required to vote. Other members, recognize the senator from Ohio County.
Mr. President, I have the same inquiry as to whether or not I should vote on this bill.
Thank you. In response to your inquiry, again, it's my understanding you're a member of a class and will therefore be required to vote. Senator from Monroe County?
I have the same inquiry.
Yes. As I understand your situation, in response to your inquiry, you're a member of a class and therefore will be required to vote. Other members? Not. Question before the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 18 yeas, 16 nays, 0 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from 17th.
Thank you, President. I move the bill be made effective from passage.
Junior Senator from 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage. All those in favor will vote. The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the motion for the effective date. And I want to just point out, perhaps everyone in the chamber realizes, the bill has in it some internal effective dates. Pay raises for teachers, other employees of school systems that are under internal effective dates in the bill will become effective on July 1st, which I think is really important. If the motion for the effective date fails, Mr. President, then what it could mean think we'd be in a little bit of uncharted territory, but the bill itself would not be effective for 90 days as provided by in the Constitution, and I think it would throw in doubt whether or not the internal effective dates would be operative. In any event, if we adopt the majority leader's motion for the effective date, it clearly resolves any questions or doubt. I urge the adoption of the effective date.
Other members desiring to speak to the motion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent and not voting, more than two-thirds of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Are there further messages from the House?
Yes, sir. The Clerk of the House announced the adoption by that body of House Concurrent Resolution 102, Desired Vision and Future for Public Education in West Virginia Interim Study.
Resolution will be received and referred to Committee on Rules.
House Concurrent Resolution 103, Albert Yanni Programs of Excellence in Vocational Education Interim Study.
Message will be received and resolution will be referred to Committee on Rules. Are there further House messages?
No, sir.
Reports from standing committees.
There are none.
Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Junior Senator. Introduction of bills. This is what I had. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to Senate Bill 1043 through Senate Bill 1055, with the exception of 1056, 1057, and 1058, be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the Chamber automation system.
Junior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent to Senate Bill number 1043 through Senate Bill number 1055, with the exception of Senate Bill number 1056, 1057, and 1058, be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the Chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Senate Bill 1056 by Senators Carmichael, Mr. President, and Prezioso by request of the Executive, supplementing and amending items of appropriation to State Board of Education, state aid to schools.
Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the bill be read a first time.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 1056, supplementing and amending items of appropriation to State Board of Education, state aid to schools. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the constitutional rule requiring a bill to be read on 3 different days be suspended. The bill be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves the constitutional rule requiring a bill be read on 3 several days be suspended. The bill be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 4/5 of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the constitutional rule suspended. Clerk will read the bill a second time.
Senate Bill 1056, supplementing and amending items of appropriation to State Board of Education, state aid to schools. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed Senate Bill 1056, third reading of the bill.
Question for Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? Is Senior Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill supplements and amends the state school aid formula to cover the provisions of House Bill 206. Excuse me. The handout on your desk covers the changes. Does everybody see the handout there? Pull it up here so I can hold it up there for them. This is the handout so that everybody can be aware of it. I wanted to make sure that I had that there. Forgive me for not having that prepared. The first column shows the current school aid formula as passed on House Bill 2020. The column shaded in gray shows what the new formula will be with the passage of House Bill 206. The third column shows the difference between the two, and the fourth column shows the difference between the two, and the fourth column shows the percentage increase or decrease. This supplemental adds an additional $60,765,628 to the school aid formula. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea, those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent not voting, more than the majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage. Request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be make it so effective.
Junior Senator from 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Bill 1057 by Senators Carmichael, Mr. President, and Prezioso by request of the Executive, supplementing and amending items of appropriation to State Board of Education.
Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the bill be read a first time.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 1057, supplementing and amending items of appropriation to State Board of Education. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the constitutional rule requiring a bill to be read on 3 different days be suspended. The bill be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the constitutional rule requiring a bill be read on 3 several days be suspended. The bill be read a second and third time placed upon its passage. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 4/5 of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the constitutional rule suspended. Clerk will read the bill a second time.
Senate Bill 1057, supplementing and amending items of appropriation to State Board of Education. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed Senate Bill 1057, third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This supplemental adds a new line to the appropriation of the Department of Education for $2,056,717 to cover the attendance incentive provisions of House Bill 206. Keep wanting to do that. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea, those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The junior senator from 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior senator from 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent to the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Bill 1058 by Senators Carmichael, Mr. President, and Prezioso by request of the Executive, supplementing an amending item of appropriation to Higher Education Policy Commission.
Junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the bill be read a first time.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 1058, supplementing and amending item of appropriation to Higher Education Policy Commission. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the constitutional rule requiring a bill to be read on 3 different days be suspended, and that the bill be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the constitutional rule requiring a bill be read on 3 several days be suspended, the bill be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 4/5 of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the constitutional rule suspended. Clerk will read the bill a second time.
Senate Bill 1058, supplementing and amending item of appropriation to Higher Education Policy Commission. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed Senate Bill 1058, supplementing and amending item of appropriation to Higher Education Policy Commission. Third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This supplemental adds $300,000 to the Higher Education Policy Commission for the Underwood Smith Scholarship Program to cover the cost of the changes that were made to the program in House Bill 206. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Mr. President, I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Further bills?
No, sir.
Resolutions?
There are none.
Motions? Petitions?
There are none.
Unfinished business?
There is none.
Bills on third reading?
There are none.
Bills on second reading?
There are none.
Bills on first reading?
There are none.
Introduction of guests? Remarks by members of the Senate. Senator from Cabell County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just let me take a minute and seek unanimous consent that the eloquent remarks of my senior senator from the 5th on House Bill 149, which is the very important flood wall funding, matching the federal funds for the Milton area, that those eloquent remarks be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Further remarks by members. The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On a different note, we're always quick to criticize the DOH, but today I was on an accident scene in Wayne County between Fort Gay and Crum, and a DOH worker, flagman, got hit by a delivery truck. So, you know, it's a dangerous job out there, and we're always quick to criticize the potholes and stuff, but it's a dangerous job, so if y'all could say a prayer for that DOH worker. Thank you, Mr. President.
If we could all rise in a moment of silence. Prayer. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Further remarks? Miscellaneous business. The senior senator from the 5th.
Mr. President, I have a voting sentiment, filed a voting sentiment with the clerk.
Clerk has a voting sentiment.
Had Senator Plymel been present in the chamber on June 3rd, 2019, he would have voted nay on the passage of the following bills: Senate Bill 1039, Senate Bill 1040.
The senior senator from the 5th.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that my voting sentiment be recorded in the journal as reported.
Without objection, so ordered. Miscellaneous business. Junior Senator from 17.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand adjourned, subject to the call of the President.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand adjourned, subject to the call of the President. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned and subject to the call of the President.